G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode we are getting back to working on the rear suspension for the 1275. Now when I was editing the episode I realised pretty quickly that we got to about the 20-minute mark and we weren't even up to the point in which we started to reassemble the rear drums and install it inside the subframe, which is just down beside me. So I figured I'd cut it into a little mini series, with no pun intended, in which you guys can see it over a couple of different episodes. So I do apologise for cutting the last one short, but sometimes you don't realise how long stuff actually takes you until you start to edit. Anyone that does any sort of editing knows the process in which is involved to be able to get this sort of stuff done. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Alright, so once you've finished reaming the rear control arm, you're happy with it, everything's moving nice and smooth, everything's clean internally, we can now proceed with reassembling the rear suspension. So what we're going to be doing is fitting the new cup inside the control arm. Now generally when you buy a set of high-lows, it comes in the kit. If not, you can buy these parts individually. All I need to do is sit directly in there and just push it all the way home. Next thing we need to do is make sure that the stub axle has been pushed all the way through and that you've fitted the circlip correctly. Once it's been fitted, we then need to determine which side this is. Now, it is worthwhile noting that the rod goes up on the inside of the car. So we know that this one is going to be the rear left because it is on the inside. Therefore, the wheel is going to be on the outside here where the stub axle is. So we need to make sure we get the right backing plate. Now we have ordered new ones from Minisport. Make sure you check them out if you haven't already. They are coded left and right. So this is the right hand and this one is the left hand. As you can see here, it is denoted by the LH. So left hand, fairly straightforward. Now what we need to do is mount it to the stub axle itself. Now it will only go on one way. This is the bottom of the wheel where the road is, and this is the top where the strut is, or the shock absorber should I say. So this adjuster needs to be at the very top. So I'm just going to turn that 180. And then you'll probably find that the bolt holes will only line up in one direction as they are offset in a bit of a triangle pattern. So we know that this is the correct side. So what we're going to do now is grab the 3 bolts that hold this on and we're going to tighten them up. Alright, so where possible I'm using brand new bolts. So what we're going to be doing is sliding all the way through as it goes all the way through and has a nut on the opposite side. So those 3 will sit directly in there. And then we're going to be able to turn it over and reapply the handbrake guide, which sits down the bottom here, and then a nut on the opposite side here. It is probably worthwhile noting as well, just to try and remove these old stickers, you can use a little bit of wax and grease remover if you're unable to get it off by your hand. Alright, so that didn't go according to plan. You can probably just get a bit of wax and grease on there. Sometimes as well, you can just pick it with your fingernail and it'll just come straight off. Alright, so I managed to get the sticker off, but it does have a couple of bit of sticky pieces of debris there. So all I'm doing is just grabbing a little bit of Super Cheap Auto wax and grease remover. You can use any other sort of brand, it doesn't really matter. I find this is fairly cheap and inexpensive and works quite well. So we just put a little bit on a rag and then we're just going to give it a bit of rub. Now you don't have to go to this extreme. The customer probably appreciates it. If it's your own car, you could probably just leave the sticker on if you want, but the fact that I'm building this for someone, I want this thing to be as perfect as I can possibly make it. So that's all nice and clean now. That's out of the way. Put the lid on and then let's move on to the next part. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to flip the arm completely over and then we can fit the nuts on the back side of this. Now, I was meant to get some new washers, but instead I'm just going to put the nuts on it for now. What you want to do is run either a spring washer behind or you want to run a spring and a flat washer. You don't want them to be too big, but just enough to be able to hold the bolt in place. Alright, so I just went to fit the rear handbrake cable guide, which generally sits around here, but unfortunately I don't have it with me. So it's a bit of a bummer, but it is what it is. So I just also realized that these are in the wrong way. It needs to be facing the opposite way. So what I'm going to do is just put these in loosely, just do them up by hand, and then we're going to keep continuing with it. Then when I get them from the customer, I'm then going to loosen them, put it on there, and then re-tension it. So you can do this when it's on the car. It is a little difficult, but having everything pulled apart like we do at this moment, it makes it significantly easier. All right, so next part is going to be grabbing the shoe adjuster mechanism itself. So that comes in from behind, and as you turn it, it then acts on these, which then pushes it out further and further away, which then increases the tension on the shoes to the inside of the drum, or if you loosen it, it does the opposite. So what I'm going to do is just grab a little bit of copper paste and just apply it around here, just to make sure that it doesn't seize in there, because these are quite renowned for seizing in there, and then once they are, they're an absolute pain to be able to get them out, and probably the only way moving forward is if you can't release it, you're going to have to replace the entire backing plate and the adjuster itself. Right, so what we need to do is just apply some around here. I'm just going to apply a little bit more than what we actually need. That way it'll help to protect it, but also as it slides in, it will actually push it further up the end of the adjuster mechanism itself. So that'll just come in from the, it comes in from the front. So we're just going to wind it backwards to be able to get it in there. At the moment we're just loosening it, just driving it in bit by bit. Alright, so all I've done is just grab an 8mm spanner. I'm just going to wind that all the way in. We should get to a point where we can use our hands. If not, we can just leave it and just have it wound in using the spanner. That's not a problem. So the hole is a little bit off center as to where the adjuster is coming all the way through. So it's going to kind of find its own track, which isn't a drama. We just got to make sure that we just do it nice and easy and it's not going to damage it any further. Alright, so I've pretty much wound that as far as it'll go. So it does have a step on the inside of the adjuster. I'll just show you on this one, just to see how far it actually goes in. So as you can see here, it's got a bit of a sleeve and then it's got a step here. So I've pretty much just wound it until it hits that step all the way down the bottom. Now, once it comes to a stop, what I'm actually going to do is leave a marking on the back of the backing plate just to show which way is loosened and which way is tightened. So I'm just going to grab my pen and draw a line from one side around to the other. I'll draw an arrow on either end, and that will just help demonstrate and show which way is tight and which way is loose. So I'm going to put an L for loose and a T for tight. Nice little Tomo's tech tip right there. And also this is removable as well, so if the customer doesn't want it, he just needs a little bit of brake cleaner, even a bit of wax and grease remover, and it will come straight off. Now let's flip it back over. So once you flipped it over, you're then going to grab your adjusters. These will sit facing inwards, so the tapered section is going to face inwards, and then that's what's going to give us our adjustment. So as it turns, it pushes through further, which then pulls the arms out, which then creates a smaller gap between the shoe and the drum itself. So next thing we need to do is get the handbrake adjuster, which sits inside here. We need to grab the shoes and all the springs to reassemble it. Okay, so next part, we want to grab our new wheel cylinder. Now these generally only go on one way. So you can see the locating tab here and the hole here. So chances are we've probably got the wrong ones, or it's for the incorrect side. So what we're going to do is we are going to sit it off to the side and check the other boxes to see if any of them are exactly the same, or if there's something we need to do to be able to remove the alignment pin just here. Alright, so the good thing about this is this alignment tool is able to be removed. All we're going to do is just grab a pair of pliers, hopefully give it a bit of a twist, and it should come out. Now we probably need to get vice grips to be able to remove it. You can just file it straight off or use a grinder and just cut it, but then you run the risk of damaging either the boot or the actual wheel cylinder itself. From memory, it actually says on their website that if you need to use these and it does have the wrong allocation for it, you can just use a pair of vice grips or similar to be able to remove it. These are the sort of things that you just got to be super careful with, just to make sure that you're not going to squash anything you shouldn't be, but also that you're going to be able to grip it tight enough to be able to get it out. Alright, cool, so that's moving now. There we go, terrific. Make sure we always leave the rubber boot inside there. That's just to protect it and save anything getting inside, and same with the nipple as well. The nipple does have a new cap, so always make sure that you renew the cap with the nipple at the same time. So this will only go one way. The big hole goes in the big hole, the little hole will go to the little hole. slide it in through there, flip over the drum brake itself. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the brake nipple and make sure that it's going to fit. Terrific. So we now have confirmed that the hole is in the right position. Now, next thing we need to do, in the kit, you will find that you have a circlip. The circlip needs to go around the backside of the wheel cylinder. So there is a special tool in which you need to be able to install it, which is this one just here. Now, it is quite simple to use, and this will be the first time I've actually used it, but it is very, very simple. What we're going to do is slide it directly on there like that, and then as we push it down, it's going to slide it directly over the top, which is then going to align it with here, and then it's going to push the clamp all the way on. So we're going to take the little bung out of there, move that to the side. We're going to grab the bolt, wind it all the way in until we come to a stop. Terrific. Now, what we're going to do to make this a bit easier for disassembly is we're going to face it so the opening is facing the nipple. That way it's not going to get caught, and also we're going to be able to remove it without having to remove the nipple if we ever have to do it in the future. So now all we need to do is wind the nut all the way down, and then slowly we're going to wind the nut all the way in, and then that's going to push it directly over the top, which is then going to lock it in place. All right, so I'm just using a 14mm spanner here, and slowly and surely I'm just going to wind that all the way down. You'll probably find that the circlip will actually move, which isn't a drama, but we just have to make sure that it stays in the one position and that it's not going to keep moving. All right, so that just pushes it down. It's just pretty much a press to go all the way in there. Now, it's not going to matter too much if it's off center, so you don't have to stress too much if it's going to get offline and it's not going to align the circlip properly to where we wanted it before. Right, so now I would imagine as it gets to the very end, it will stretch it right over there. And then hopefully should lock it on. All right, so I just backed it off just so I can get the nipple out of there. Just made it a bit easier because it was starting to get a little bit stuck on the inside. All right, so I'm just using 2 spanners here, and the stub axle has a bit of a brace just to be able to tighten it up and to be able to push it on. So I'm kind of cheating, but at the same time, it just makes it a bit easier. You could probably do this on the car, but once again, having it off the car makes it a bit easier. All right, so I'm fairly satisfied with how far that's actually gone home now. So what I'm going to do is just loosen off the locking nut, and we should be able to get the bolt out of here and see how far it's actually gone down inside there. That one should come straight off. Might just take a little bit of persuasion to be able to get it off properly, depending how far it's actually pushed it down over the end of the cone. Terrific. All right, so that is completely locked on there. You can't exactly see. It has done a bit of a 180, which is a little bit frustrating. So hopefully I can just try and realign the clamp with where it needs to be. Ideally, you want the clamp facing the top. That way, if you ever have to take it out, you just slide it directly down and it's not going to get in the way of the bleed nipple. All right, so I managed to move it to where I need it to be. The clamp is a little loose. I'm just going to see how that goes. Probably once I put the pipe in through here, it's actually going to tighten up and it's going to help sit it in place. But more importantly, when you get the shoes inside here, it's also going to help it stay in position. Now, if that seems a little bit loose to me down the track, once everything's on there, I will take it off and I'll do another one. But let's keep moving forward. So the next thing is some brake shoes. So these will only go one particular way. They are designed for both front and rear. Right, so in order for us to put the shoes on, we need to be able to fit the handbrake levers. Now, we did have the original ones that we were going to reuse, but for what it's worth, a set of these would cost you about 50 Australian dollars. So they're not really much to spend on, but also they're quite a cheap and nice piece of gear as well. Not that you really see it, but it is worthwhile upgrading if you have the money to do it. So this arm will only go in one way. Generally it will sit in here like this. It then needs to make sure that it clips inside the rear wheel cylinder. So inside this bit here, so that way the wheel cylinder is not going to move around. You then need to get the other side as well. We're going to be facing it the same way, so we have this adjustment on this side here, so it kind of clips in, and that's what holds it all into place. So now we're almost there. What we need to be doing also is making sure that we fit the new adjuster slides here. So these will only go in one way once again, and it's going to be facing downwards. The reason why it's facing downwards is because the pin is facing down as well. So I'll just let that go and we'll have a look here. So if you have a look at it just here, it needs to sit up against this surface here. As it winds in, it then pushes up, which then pushes the arm out. If you have it facing the other way, it's not going to push it on it properly. So you need to make sure that the flat edge is at the top and the step is down the bottom. So it seats directly like that. Let's put that in, one in either side. Now those will sit in directly behind there as well. So as you push it, it's then going to adjust it. So we're not going to adjust it just yet. One thing we need to do next is apply the springs on the inside of the shoes. So on the shoes themselves, they do have some little cutouts, and the cutouts depict where the springs go. Next thing to do is apply the springs. So as you can see, we have two different types of springs. The smaller one, so the one with the main spring in the middle with the larger two ends, that goes towards the top, so towards the wheel cylinder, and the larger one with the two smaller springs on the outer edges goes towards the bottom. So here's a shoe that we're going to be applying to the other side. So what you need to do is fit the spring facing the backing plate, so it's going to sit directly up inside here. So you can see just here where the handbrake lever comes through, it's going to be sitting directly below it in there. This one also needs to be fitted to this side here, so you can fit these before you install the entire thing, but it can be a little bit tricky, but you can do it with a good screwdriver or a set of pliers. Once you've fitted the top one, you're then going to be working your way to the bottom. Now the bottom one needs to sit in this hole directly here above this kind of D-shaped hole here. So one there, and then once again the other one on the opposite side. These can be quite fiddly to do, so it may take you a couple of goes to be able to get it, but just make sure that your adjustments are backed all the way off before you start. There we go. Just finger it from behind and should be right to get in. Grab the other one. Now this one is probably going to be a little bit more tricky, so I'll teach you a quick little Tomo's tech tip to be able to get this in. Alright, so Tomo's tech tip here is we're going to fit the front side first. So this one just here, just because the bolt's in the way from the other side. Pull it all the way through the arm. Terrific. Now, grab your pair of side cutters, and with the flat edge, so this one here compared to this one, run it towards the back side of the spring, and then use it as a bit of a lever to be able to pull it all the way over. Now you just need to be careful with this that you don't apply too much pressure, as you can obviously cut it. Once it's in, it's then on. Now, it probably looked like I'd done that before and I made it look very easy, which I probably did because I've done a trillion of these before. It is worthwhile noting as well that the bolt that you use here isn't going to be too long, so I might need to flip that one around or get a shorter bolt on this side here. That way it's not going to be touching the spring. The spring is what holds the tension on the shoes together, so it's not always going to be dragging. Now, next thing we need to do is get the drum seated on there and just see what adjustments we need to make, if any. Alright, so I just freaked out. I got this box sent to me from one of my suppliers, being Minisport, and on the box it said that it was a disc. This is clearly not a disc. So let's just check this out here. Oh, perfect. Now it is worthwhile noting as well that these are a stepped drum, meaning that they're not completely smooth like some of them are. So the standard ones don't have this step just here, it is just completely flush with the end. Now this will give increased track width, but you need to make sure as well that you run the right studs in the rear axle. So we don't actually have the rear studs, nor do we have the axle, nor do we have the bearings. So that's something we're going to obtain. But it is worthwhile noting that if you're using stepped ones, you need to run longer studs for it to be able to come all the way through. So this is almost complete. I'm just going to find out where the stub axles are, or the hub should I say. We need to get new bearings, which we can do shortly, and then anything else we can attach to the back of it.